You never know. Both times I went to work that day. It wasn't supposed to happen.
Okay.
Are you good? All right. Good morning, everyone. We'll now call the City Council meeting of Monday, October 28th, 2024 to order. Deputy Clerk, please call the roll.
Council President Pro Tem LaCava,
Present.
Councilmember Campbell, Councilmember Whitburn,
Here.
Councilmember Foster,
Present.
Councilmember Von Wilpert, Councilmember Lee, Councilmember Campillo, Councilmember Moreno,
Present.
and Council President Ela Rivera.
Present.
Also attending the meeting are City Attorney Mara Elliott, Independent Budget Analyst Charles Modica, and myself, your Deputy City Clerk, Jennifer Berry.
All right. With that, we will get started with an invocation by Deputy City Clerk Berry, which will be followed by the land acknowledgement and Pledge of Allegiance led by Council Member Lee.
Grant those who hold office in the city the spirit of wisdom, charity, and justice, that with steadfast purpose they may faithfully serve in their offices to promote the well-being of all people.
Starting with the land acknowledgement, we respectfully acknowledge that the Kumeyaay Nation are the original inhabitants of the unceded land now known as San Diego. Despite enduring the horrors of genocide and colonization, the Kumeyaay spirit remains unbroken. We honor the resilience of their ancestors who fought to protect their culture and land. Today, they carry their legacy forward, ensuring that their traditions continue to thrive in gratitude and strength. We stand with the Kumeyaay Nation, connected to our past and committed to a thriving future. Now, if you'll face the flag and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, begin.
I will now go over how the public can offer their public testimony during today's meeting. If you're in person, please complete a speaker slip located at the entrance of chambers and place it on top of the box indicated at the high lectern at the front of the room. Please submit your speaker slip in a timely manner to ensure proper meeting management. No further in-person testimony will be taken once the council begins virtual testimony. If you'd like to participate virtually, you can do so via the webinar information found on the agenda cover page. Members of the public who wish to provide virtual testimony must enter the virtual queue by raising their hand by either dialing *9 or pressing the raise your hand icon before the queue closes. The queue will close when the last virtual speaker finishes speaking or 5 minutes after in-person testimony ends, whichever occurs first. I will go ahead and read the closed session items into the record. Conference with legal counsel, existing litigation pursuant to California Government Code, Section 54956.9D1, CS1, Gutierrez Quinto versus City of San Diego et al. CS2, Paul Hiller versus City of San Diego. CS3, Christian Caitlin Garrett versus City of San Diego.
All right, let's proceed with public comment, please.
We don't have any public comment here in chambers, but we do have two folks in our virtual queue with their hands up. I'm going to go ahead and start our 5-minute timer. Our first speaker will be Lori Saldana. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. If you will unmute on your end and let us know which item or items you'd like to speak to.
Good morning, Council. Thank you. I'd like to speak to each of these.
Ms. Saldana, are you available? It looks like you're unmuted.
Or 1 minute per item. What is the time allotment for these
It appears
items?
we are having some technical difficulties. Let me see if our next guests are here. Hold on one moment, please. Ms. Saldana, will you go ahead and unmute for me again and see if that worked?
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry about that. Can you let me know which item or items you'd like to speak to?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to address each 3 of these items.
Okay, you have 2 minutes per item. Please proceed.
Thank you. And as I have mentioned in the past, each of these has to do with a fall, and at least one, I believe, is an older resident who had a slip and fall. My family had a direct experience with this when my mother, who was 80 years old, slipped and fell not far from City Hall. And as a result of injuries that were not fully appreciated at the time, that she wound up dying a few months later from complications from injuries from the fall. So whenever I see these items come up, it concerns me that they continue. A fall for a younger person may be merely an inconvenience and require a trip to be evaluated. And I actually went through that recently in Little Italy. But for an older person, it can be life-changing and in ways that contribute to downward progression of health and mobility, and really does impact their quality of life and the quality of life for everyone who is close to them. So I encourage the council to take that into account as you're going through measures to prevent these falls, and realize that as our climate is changing and we are experiencing flooding in some communities, but also just overall more rainfall, that you consider how that impacts infrastructure that was designed and maintained with certain climate conditions in mind. And now those climate conditions are changing quickly. And the result of those changes can be uplifted sidewalks. It can be tree roots that are growing faster because of increased rainfall. It can be erosion that damages sidewalks and streets. So this is, I realize that generally you don't look at this as a climate action plan consideration, but in some ways I think it actually is, and needs to be looked at as how do we manage safety at times when the climate is contributing to problems with our infrastructure and affecting not only the functioning and the built infrastructure, but impacting human lives that come into contact with that. So again, since each of these have to do with the same slip and fall, I wanted to speak to not the particulars because I don't know the particulars of a closed session item, but they appear to be, again, broken streets, infrastructure, possibly traffic conditions. And I'm also speaking because, quite frankly, I not only have direct experience, but I know many others who have direct experience of this that are not getting to the point of litigation, that may not come to the attention of the city attorney and the city council. And I encourage them to participate, to call in, but they are often working or unable to participate. And so I want to just let you know, I'm not just speaking from my own family's experience, I'm speaking from the experience of many others, including a friend who tripped and fell, almost fell. I was able to prevent her from hitting the sidewalk just the other night in Little Italy, once again, where there was a lifted grate under a tree that had been moved and created a trip hazard. And she did trip and would have fallen, as I had fallen, over a streetery deck a few months ago, had I not been walking alongside her and was able to prevent her from falling. So this is a person who is slated for surgery soon, who is dealing with health and medical issues. The last thing she needed was another injury to potentially delay her surgery or create complications that could make her recovery more difficult. So I appreciate the generous time that you give for the comments on these items in closed session, but I really more so appreciate the changes to the people's lives who are taking the extraordinary step of litigating this and going through the public process of suing. I encourage you to consider how the climate action plan should look at trip and fall hazards as infrastructure is impacted by changes to our weather patterns. And I encourage anyone who has direct experience of this or family experience of this to please participate and let the council know so you can more fully appreciate how widespread and persistent these incidents are, not just related to the sidewalk trips and falls, but many other forms of infrastructure, the lovely ornamental grates in Little Italy, the street decks or the sidewalk eating platforms that are supposed to be inspected and maintained. When those begin to fail, then you will have even more people potentially coming and suing the city because of these injuries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is the original. I've gone ahead and unmuted. You've unmuted. Can you let me know which item or items you'd like to speak to?
Yes, all three, please.
Okay, please proceed. You'll have 2 minutes per item.
Thank you. Yeah, it's interesting to see how many of these cases repeatedly come forward. It's very disturbing, and I'd have to do some, research into other cities to see if they have a similar, number of these trip and falls that they're litigating and that, settling on and giving settlements for, because it is rather disturbing to have it come forward every time there's a closed session, and many of them. And then if what Lori's saying is true, is that there's other ones that are, not even making it to this stage. That's even more disturbing, because it's like, this shouldn't be happening on a repeated basis over and over. And I think that it's faulty to blame climate change when it is the negligence of the city of keeping the infrastructure. Because if you were doing that and there are storms that come, and many of them are man-made at this point, which nobody wants to acknowledge. They want to put it under the umbrella of climate change, when in fact it's man-made weather warfare by seeding the clouds and causing massive damage, which has been happening for a very long time. They do these experiments, and it really is harmful to the people, and people lose their lives. They lose all of the things, they have to rebuild their lives if they're able to, even, because then there's no help for that. But if we're keeping up with the infrastructure, and those storms happen, that shouldn't there shouldn't be litigation. There shouldn't be issues with I mean, there can be some unforeseen type of things that happen with infrastructure, but as long as you're keeping up with what needs to be done with it, with the maintenance and making sure, that you're doing that, then there's less and less chance of failures. But the problem is that, money gets diverted to somewhere else, and, there's, not enough staff, or many different things as to why. And, people are being injured because of it. And again, just to see so many come forward every week. I mean, I just feel like, wouldn't you guys want to make sure that this doesn't happen anymore? Instead of, kind of going through the motions, it's almost just like a repeat of Groundhog Day type of thing. You're just continually seeing the same type of stuff, and then you have to wonder, why is that happening? And you can't blame it on other things when, the main issue is that the city isn't doing its job, and it's constantly costing the people money. And people shouldn't have to, like, sue the city because they're failing at stuff. I mean, they do, because it's necessary so that they can recoup what they've lost. And, once you're injured, it's like you can never get your health back. After being beat up by a sheriff at board meeting, just because time passes doesn't mean that I'm ever going to be at the same health that I was prior to that. And so people have to continue to suffer, even if you get money for it. It's like you're still going to have these injuries many times. And if you are older, it's going to be a lot harder to heal if you do at all. So it's like a constant reminder to somebody when they are injured that, there's failures that take place, and no amount of money is ever going to make up for that. So it would behoove you guys to make sure that you're going and doing your job and making sure that the infrastructure is conducive to people walking, people biking, people driving. And the problem is that, like I tell you all the time, you want people to walk, bike, and take public transit. But if you're not doing your part to make sure that that's safe, then you shouldn't be pushing that until you know that it can be, until you know that you have all of the infrastructure taken care of, that it is not going to put anybody in danger, because it does. And I mean, I wouldn't want to wish any kind of injuries upon you guys, but sometimes you have to actually know what it's like to understand why it's so important to make sure that you're doing your job and make sure that you're providing a safe way for people to travel, especially when you have so much money that you spend on things. And a lot of times you waste your money on things that aren't going to move the needle forward or aren't going to provide that. And then this suffers, the infrastructure suffers because the money's going other places. And it is interesting that when we do have closed session, when there's items that are similar like this, you'll give 2 minutes each. But then, when it's something that is a little bit more important, not necessarily important, but that has more, more people want to talk about it, you tend to silence the people. So it's kind of sad to see that, for some things you'll go ahead and just, give all this time in the world, but when there's more people and more people want to address it and have things to say, then you cut their time down. And it's really sad to see, but it shows us the state of, the city. So, hopefully these people can recover from their injuries. Hopefully, this is something that starts to lessen as time goes on and not increase with the number of cases that come forward. And hopefully you guys can understand, without having to be injured yourselves, why it's so important to make sure you keep up with the infrastructure.
That concludes your time. Our 5-minute timer has also gone off on here in chambers. We have no other hands up in the queue. That concludes public comment on the closed session items.
All right. Thank you so much. With that, we will adjourn into closed session and reconvene for open session at 2 p.m. Thank you.